Burt Lancaster reveals 14 Golden Age actors who were actually evil. What if I told you? The heroes you trusted, the faces you welcomed into your living room, the legends who defined Hollywood's Golden Age, were hiding something far darker than anyone ever imagined? What if the smiles were masks, the courage was an illusion, and the kindness you believed in was only for the camera? In 2007, a secret journal surfaced. Not a memoir, not nostalgia, but a warning, written by Burt Lancaster. 14 names, 14 icons, 14 truths Hollywood never wanted you to hear. So before you remember them as legends, ask yourself one question. How well did you really know your heroes? Kirk Douglas, the hero who learned how to break people. In the Hollywood people remember, Kirk Douglas stood like a monument. Square jaw, burning eyes, a man carved from defiance. On screen, he fought injustice, shattered chains, and spoke truth to power. For a generation, he wasn't just an actor. He was proof that strength and morality could live in the same body. But behind the camera, Burt Lancaster wrote, a different man moved through the studios. This Kirk Douglas didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Power had taught him something more efficient: silence, timing, and fear. He understood Hollywood like a chessboard, every producer a piece, every casting decision a threat. Careers didn't end with screaming matches. They ended quietly. A meeting that never happened. A role that suddenly disappeared. A name that stopped being returned. Lancaster described Douglas as someone who studied weakness the way an engineer studies stress fractures. He knew who needed the job too badly, who couldn't afford to say no, who would bend before they broke, and who he could afford to destroy. One story stayed with him. A young actress, promising, talented, invisible without the right doors opening. She refused a private dinner invitation. No confrontation, no argument, just a polite decline. Days later, she was removed from the film. No explanation, no appeal. Her future erased with the same precision Douglas brought to his performances. It wasn't coincidence, it was consequence. Power, Lancaster wrote, had taught Douglas that punishment didn't need witnesses. And once Douglas realized how easily fear traveled through a studio system built on dependence, he used it without hesitation. He distributed favors the way others distributed scripts. He collected loyalty like currency. And when resistance appeared, it was isolated, cornered, and quietly eliminated. What made Douglas truly dangerous wasn't cruelty alone, it was credibility. The world believed in him. Protest marches. Speeches about justice. The image was so clean it blinded people to the damage happening just out of frame. Those who spoke out sounded ungrateful. Those who disappeared were assumed to have failed on their own. To Lancaster, Kirk Douglas wasn't a monster hiding in the dark. He was something more unsettling. A man who learned that righteousness could be worn like armor while doing irreversible harm behind it. And that, Burt believed, was why the list had to begin with him. Because once you understand how easily heroism can coexist with cruelty, you're ready to see the rest of Hollywood clearly. Natalie Wood, the power of fragility. To the world, Natalie Wood looked breakable. She had the eyes of someone who carried sadness gently, like a secret she never wanted to burden anyone with. On screen, she didn't dominate a room, she softened it. She made audiences lean forward, protective, convinced that innocence itself had learned how to breathe. But in Burt Lancaster's telling, that softness was not weakness. It was strategy. Natalie understood something many powerful men never did. You don't always need force to control people. Sometimes, all you need is to make them afraid of hurting you. On set, Lancaster wrote, Natalie could bend an entire production without raising her voice. When pressure mounted, she didn't argue. She collapsed. A fainting spell, perfectly timed. Cameras stopped. Crew members panicked. Hours passed. No one dared to question her condition, because questioning her meant becoming the villain, the heartless one who pushed a fragile star too far. One incident never left Burt's mind. During a tense shoot, Natalie suddenly fainted in full view of cast and crew. Medics were called. The day unraveled. When filming resumed 10 hours later, One thing had changed quietly, almost invisibly. An actor she disliked was gone. No announcement. No confrontation. Just absence. His career rerouted by a body hitting the floor. Natalie, Lancaster believed, understood perception better than most directors. She knew how to cry without tears. How to appear helpless without surrendering control. How to make powerful men feel responsible for her survival, and therefore obedient to her needs. But her influence didn't stop at the studio gates. In the weeks before her death, a journalist confided something unsettling to Burt. Natalie had allegedly been using secrets as leverage, threatening careers with information she knew could ruin lives. It wasn't loud. It wasn't public. It was whispered pressure, applied where it hurt most. Lancaster never claimed to know what truly happened on that yacht in 1981. He wrote only one sentence about it. The sea didn't kill her. It only hid what she left behind. To Burt, Natalie Wood wasn't a tragic doll swallowed by fate. She was a woman who mastered the most dangerous form of power in Hollywood. The kind that disguises itself as vulnerability. The kind no one dares accuse, because doing so feels cruel. And that, he believed, was her greatest shield. Because when fragility becomes a weapon, no one knows when they've lost, until the damage is already done. Mickey Rooney, the smile that enjoyed the damage. Mickey Rooney never looked dangerous. He was too small, too energetic, too familiar. The grin came fast, the jokes faster. America knew him as the eternal boy, the spark of joy who could light up a screen before anyone realized what had happened. He didn't command rooms. He bounced through them. And that, Burt Lancaster wrote, is exactly how he got away with it. Rooney didn't need power in the traditional sense. He didn't silence people with influence or threaten them with closed doors. He did something more intimate, more corrosive. He humiliated them. Slowly, publicly, and with pleasure. On set, Lancaster recalled, Rooney treated background actors like toys. A crooked tie. A bad haircut. The way someone walked across the floor. Nothing was too small to be used as a blade. His comments were delivered lightly, almost playfully, but always loud enough for others to hear. The laughter that followed never reached his eyes. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. He watched. Burt wrote that Rooney studied faces as he spoke, waiting for the exact moment confidence collapsed. When someone flushed. When their posture shrank. When embarrassment turned into shame. That was the moment he liked best. That was when he knew he had won. But the cruelty didn't end when the cameras stopped rolling. Behind closed doors, Rooney's marriages became battlegrounds. Control disguised as discipline. Affection rationed, then withdrawn. Lancaster documented patterns of emotional abuse that hardened into physical violence, not in moments of passion, but in moments of entitlement. As if he believed the people closest to him existed to absorb his moods. One incident from the early 1970s haunted Burt. On a film set, surrounded by crew and equipment, Rooney struck his wife across the face because she arrived late. There was no apology, no shame. Just the quiet understanding that no one would intervene. The humiliation wasn't accidental. It was the point. To Lancaster, Rooney represented a different species of darkness than the others on the list. Not the calculated strategist. Not the silent manipulator. But the sadist, the man who needed to see someone else shrink in order to feel whole. What made him dangerous was how easily the world excused him. He was difficult. He was mercurial. He was just being Mickey. His size made him seem harmless. His charm made him forgivable. But Burt wrote something chilling beneath Rooney's name. Some people don't hurt others to survive. They survive by hurting others. And in Hollywood, where laughter often drowned out discomfort, Mickey Rooney learned that cruelty could hide in plain sight, as long as it wore a smile. Elizabeth Taylor. When emotion became absolute power, Elizabeth Taylor didn't need to demand attention. It arrived the moment she entered a room. The eyes did most of the work, that impossible shade of violet that seemed less like a color and more like a command. In Hollywood's golden age, beauty was currency, and Elizabeth Taylor was impossibly rich. To the public, she was elegance incarnate. Passion. Romance. a woman too luminous to be questioned. But Burt Lancaster wrote that behind the glamour lived something far more formidable. Elizabeth understood a truth few dared admit. In an industry built on schedules, money, and momentum, the person who could stop everything ruled everything. During the chaotic production of Cleopatra in 1962, that power revealed itself. A trivial moment triggered it, a co-star wearing a dress in the same color as hers. It should have been nothing, a coincidence, a footnote. Instead, it became a standoff. Elizabeth locked herself in her dressing room. Minutes passed, then hours. Cameras stood idle. Crew members whispered. Millions of dollars bled away while no one moved. The studio didn't argue. The director didn't confront her. Everyone waited, because everyone knew the truth. The production could survive a delay. It could not survive defying her. When the director finally approached, asking her to return to set, Elizabeth didn't explain. She didn't negotiate. She threw a glass of wine at him. The room froze. To Lancaster, that moment wasn't a tantrum. It was a declaration. Her emotions were not private matters. They were law. When she felt slighted, the world stopped. When she was satisfied, it resumed. And that authority extended far beyond set walls. During her marriage to Richard Burton, Elizabeth's influence reshaped careers. She pressured studios, redirected casting decisions, and tightened her grip on Hollywood's most powerful circles. Love, Lancaster believed, was only part of the equation. The rest was leverage. Alliances formed not around affection, but around benefit. Her relationships were storms that pulled everyone nearby into orbit. Producers bent. Directors adjusted. Entire projects restructured themselves around her moods. And those who resisted quickly learned how small they were by comparison. To the public, Elizabeth Taylor was misunderstood, a woman overwhelmed by fame, passion, and expectation. To Burt Lancaster, she was something else entirely, a master of emotional sovereignty. A woman who understood that if you control the temperature of a room, you control every person inside it. She didn't need cruelty in the traditional sense. She didn't need threats. Her feelings alone were enough to bend an industry. And as Burt turned the page, he knew the list was moving somewhere darker. Because the next name belonged to a man whose power didn't erupt in fury or beauty, but simmered quietly behind genius, alcohol, and fear. Spencer Tracy, the quiet genius who weaponized fear. Spencer Tracy was the kind of man people trusted instinctively. He spoke softly. He listened carefully. On screen, he carried the weight of wisdom, the weary intelligence of someone who had seen the world clearly and still chose decency. To many, he was Hollywood's conscience. The thinking man's actor. Proof that depth and kindness could coexist. Burt Lancaster wrote that once the cameras stopped, that illusion dissolved. Tracy didn't explode often. He didn't need to. His danger lived in anticipation, in the tension that filled a room before he said a word. Alcohol was always nearby. Bottles scattered like silent witnesses. And behind them, a man who understood exactly how fear worked. Lancaster described stepping into Tracy's dressing room and feeling the air change. The smell of liquor. The quiet hum of something volatile. Tracy didn't drink to escape, Burt believed. He drank to control. The deeper he sank into alcohol, the more unpredictable he became, and unpredictability kept people obedient. One incident during the filming of Judgment at Nuremberg in 1961 never left Burt. A minor makeup error. A trivial mistake. Tracy's response was sudden and violent. He grabbed a liquor bottle and slammed it against the makeup table, shattering glass across the room. Shards flew. The makeup artist froze, unsure whether to run or apologize. No one intervened. Not because they agreed, but because they were afraid. And fear, Tracy knew, was efficient. But the most disturbing part wasn't the violence. It was the manipulation that followed. Lancaster wrote that Tracy often threatened suicide when challenged. Not in moments of despair, but in moments of resistance. A co-star disagreed. A director pushed back. Tracy would grow quiet, withdrawn, hinting that he might end everything if pushed further. The message was clear. comply, or live with the guilt. To those around him, it felt like compassion to give in. To Burt, it felt like emotional hostage-taking. A tactic that blurred the line between concern and control until no one knew where responsibility ended. Spencer Tracy, Lancaster believed, represented one of Hollywood's most dangerous disguises, the tortured genius. A man whose brilliance excused his cruelty, whose pain was treated as sacred, while the damage he inflicted was ignored. He didn't rule through shouting or charm. He ruled through tension, through silence, through the constant threat that something terrible might happen, and that it would somehow be your fault. And as Burt turned the page once more, he wrote that Hollywood's darkest power didn't always look angry. Sometimes it looked kind. Sometimes it looked thoughtful. And sometimes, it smiled gently while deciding who deserved to feel small next. James Stewart, the silence that destroyed careers. James Stewart never needed to intimidate anyone. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He didn't explode the way others did. His power was quieter, and because of that, far more difficult to defend against. To America, he was goodness made flesh. The steady voice. The honest eyes. The man who stood for decency when the world felt unstable. Watching him on screen felt like reassurance, like being told that integrity still mattered. Burt Lancaster wrote that behind the scenes, Stewart understood something dangerous. People trust silence more than anger. On set, he observed everything. He spoke little. He listened deeply. And while others acted, Stewart took notes. Literal ones. Small private observations about co-stars. Missed cues, awkward deliveries, moments of uncertainty. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that looked like malice. At the end of the day, when the set emptied and no one was watching, Stewart would hand those notes to the director. No confrontation. No explanation. No chance to respond. Actors would arrive the next morning confused. Suddenly criticized. Suddenly replaced. They never knew why. They only felt the weight of quiet judgment pressing down on them from a man everyone believed was incapable of cruelty. Lancaster recalled a moment from 1957 that unsettled him deeply. Stewart refused to appear on screen with a black actor, but he didn't frame it as prejudice. He spoke softly about tone and story balance. He let producers take the blame. He let others deliver the bad news. And through it all, his image remained untouched. But the most chilling accusation Burt recorded came later. Stewart, he claimed, had forged documents, single sheets of paper crafted carefully, strategically, accusing those who opposed him of professional misconduct. The accusations were never loud. They didn't need to be. In Hollywood, paperwork delivered to the right desk was enough to end a career quietly and permanently. To Lancaster, James Stewart embodied the most dangerous form of power. Moral authority weaponized. He didn't need rage. He didn't need fear. His humility did the work for him. People doubted themselves in his presence. They questioned their worth. They assumed they were wrong, because how could James Stewart be? That was the trap. Because when cruelty wears the face of virtue, no one recognizes it until the damage is complete. And as Burt turned the page, he wrote that the list was about to reach a different kind of darkness. One that hid not behind silence or wisdom, but behind vulnerability. Marilyn Monroe, the gravity of absence. Marilyn Monroe never had to demand control. She simply vanished. To the world, she was fragility incarnate. The trembling voice, the soft smile, the woman who looked like she might shatter if the world pressed too hard. Audiences didn't admire her strength. They wanted to protect her. And Hollywood, Burt Lancaster wrote, mistook that instinct for innocence. But Marilyn understood something primal. Nothing creates power like uncertainty. On the set of Some Like It Hot in 1959, her presence dictated the rhythm of everything. Or more precisely, her absence did. Without warning, she would disappear. Hours passed. Then entire days. Cameras stayed silent. Crew members waited. Schedules collapsed. No one dared move forward, because nothing moved without her. When she returned, there were no explanations. No apologies. Just a soft smile and an air of exhaustion that made everyone feel cruel for wanting answers. The production bent itself around her moods, her timing, her emotional weather. Lancaster believed Marilyn wielded vulnerability the way others wielded authority. She never needed to say no. She simply made herself unreachable. And in that vacuum, others panicked, rewriting plans, adjusting expectations, sacrificing their own stability to accommodate hers. In her personal life, the pattern repeated. When producer Jack Warner pushed her toward collaborations she didn't want, Marilyn didn't argue. She collapsed emotionally. Panic attacks, tears, despair so intense it paralyzed everyone around her. Warner wasn't choosing between contracts anymore. He was choosing between protecting her or breaking her. And every time, Marilyn won. To Burt, this wasn't chaos. It was gravity. Marilyn pulled people into orbit, producers, directors, co-stars, until they felt responsible for her survival. Her pain became their burden. Her instability became their problem to solve. And in that dynamic, she held all the power. She made everyone feel like if she fell, Lancaster wrote, it would be their fault. Hollywood called her tragic, misunderstood, a victim of fame. Burt saw something more complex. A woman who learned that softness could dominate, that absence could command, that fragility could freeze an industry in place. Marilyn Monroe wasn't weak. She was irresistible. And when you're irresistible, people will surrender control willingly, without ever realizing they've lost it. As Burt turned the page again, the list moved from emotional gravity to something far darker. Because the next man didn't hide behind vulnerability or silence. He hid behind charm. Errol Flynn, the predator behind the smile. Errol Flynn lived like a man who believed consequences were for other people. On screen, he was freedom itself. Laughter, danger, adventure wrapped in effortless charm. The sword fighter, the rogue, the man who could steal a heart with a grin and disappear before anyone asked questions. Audiences didn't just watch Errol Flynn. They followed him. Burt Lancaster wrote that behind that charm lived something far more calculated. Flynn didn't rule Hollywood from offices or casting rooms. He ruled it from excess. From parties that never ended. From rooms soaked in alcohol, drugs, and silence. The kind of silence people keep when they're afraid of losing everything. Lancaster described gatherings that felt less like celebrations and more like hunting grounds. Young women invited into a world of glamour they didn't yet understand. Music loud enough to drown doubt. Laughter sharp enough to blur danger. And at the center of it all, Flynn. Watching, choosing, indulging. Resistance, Burt wrote, was remembered. Those who pushed back found doors closing quietly. Phone calls unanswered. Opportunities evaporating. Flynn's power wasn't just personal, it was protected. Studios looked away. Friends covered. The industry preferred the myth to the truth. One incident shook Lancaster deeply. Flynn was arrested on serious drug trafficking charges. It should have been the end. Instead, Flynn made a single phone call. Within hours, he walked free. No trial. No headlines. No consequences. That moment, Burt believed, changed everything. Flynn realized the system would protect him, not because he was innocent, but because he was valuable. And once that realization settled in, restraint vanished. His recklessness escalated. The parties grew darker. The behavior more violent. The charm more dangerous because people wanted so badly to believe it was harmless. To Burt Lancaster, Errol Flynn wasn't a man who lost control. He was a man who discovered he didn't need it. Charisma became his camouflage. Fame his shield. And behind them, he moved without boundaries, leaving broken lives in his wake, protected by an industry that valued fantasy over accountability. Hollywood remembered Errol Flynn as a legend. Burt remembered him as a warning. Because when charm replaces conscience, and power meets indulgence, the smile becomes the most dangerous weapon of all. And as Burt turned the page once more, the darkness shifted again, away from glamour and excess, and into the quiet terror of home. Bing Crosby, the warm voice that ruled through fear. Bing Crosby sounded like safety. His voice wrapped itself around Christmas mornings, family radios, quiet evenings by the fire. He didn't perform warmth, he embodied it. To America, Bing Crosby was comfort, tradition, a man whose presence felt like reassurance itself. Burt Lancaster wrote that behind closed doors, that warmth went cold. Crosby didn't rule his household with shouting. He didn't need to. His power lived in restraint, in a look, in silence, in the slow withdrawal of affection. His children learned early how to read the signals. A certain stare meant punishment was coming. A certain tone meant you had already failed. Lancaster described a home where love was conditional and fear was instructional. Obedience wasn't encouraged, it was enforced. Mistakes weren't corrected, they were punished until they were remembered. One story stayed with Burt long after he heard it. Crosby allegedly forced his son to stand shirtless in freezing weather as punishment for a bad grade. The lesson wasn't academic. It was psychological. Failure, Bing believed, needed to be felt in the body, in the bones. To the public, Crosby sang lullabies. At home, he taught endurance. Years later, that private cruelty surfaced. Gary Crosby, his son, broke the silence in a memoir that stunned the country. He didn't write with rage. He wrote with exhaustion. He described beatings with a golf club, relentless criticism, a childhood defined not by love, but by survival. I would have preferred any other father, Gary wrote, even a criminal. To Burt Lancaster, those words mattered more than any rumor. They confirmed what he believed was the most dangerous kind of cruelty, the kind that hides behind decency. The kind no one questions because it looks respectable. Bing Crosby didn't need scandal. He didn't need chaos. He needed control. And control, delivered quietly and consistently, shaped his children more deeply than any public scandal ever could. As Burt turned the page again, he didn't see the end of a story. He saw its continuation. Because the next name on the list wasn't just another star. It was the consequence of this one. Gary Crosby, the inheritance of violence. Gary Crosby never stood a chance. He grew up inside a house where fear was education and pain was routine, where love arrived only when obedience was perfect, and vanished the moment it wasn't. Burt Lancaster wrote that Gary didn't learn cruelty from the world. He learned it at home, absorbed it the way children absorb language, until it felt natural. As a boy, Gary was beaten with golf clubs, shamed for weakness, trained to associate authority with pain and affection with silence. These weren't isolated incidents. They were patterns repeated so often they carved themselves into his sense of self. By the time he reached adulthood, fear was the only grammar he knew. Hollywood gave him opportunity. Fame opened doors. But trauma followed him inside. Lancaster described Gary as a man constantly vibrating with unresolved rage, anger with nowhere safe to go. When frustration surfaced, it exploded outward. Girlfriends became targets. Colleagues became enemies. Strangers became threats. One director's windshield was smashed simply because Gary wasn't invited to dinner. Not out of malice, but out of wounded entitlement, the same logic he'd been raised under. Drugs entered the picture. So did reckless associations. Violence no longer shocked anyone who knew him well. It was expected, predictable, almost inevitable. Burt wrote one line beneath Gary's name that carried more sadness than judgment. He didn't know how to love. He only knew how to make people afraid, because that was the only language his father ever taught him. Gary wasn't born cruel. He was shaped. Hollywood often tells stories about broken men as cautionary tales. Burt Lancaster saw something more uncomfortable, a mirror. Proof that unchecked power inside a family can echo forward, mutating, growing sharper with each generation. Gary Crosby wasn't an anomaly. He was a consequence. And as Burt turned the page again, the list shifted away from inherited violence and toward a colder form of harm, one that didn't shout, didn't strike, and didn't leave bruises. These stories aren't here to erase the golden age. They're here to remind us of something far more uncomfortable. That talent doesn't equal goodness. That fame doesn't mean integrity. And that power, when left unchecked, always leaves a shadow. So now the question isn't what Hollywood hid back then. It's this: how many idols today are still hiding in plain sight? If this story changed the way you see these legends, stay with me. The next name goes even deeper, and it may be the most unsettling one yet. Subscribe, comment your thoughts, and don't look away.